us in the room today is the pressing need to address the Treaty Principles Bill. We know this isn't the only attack that's been going on, but we also know that this is one of the most overt public attacks that has been happening and is one of the things that has drawn us all together. Here at Action Station, we see Te Tiriti o Waitangi as a vision for how we can live in peace and mutual benefit in Aotearoa. Attempts to breach, undermine, or rewrite Te Tiriti o Waitangi affect all of us, considering that this document, signed 200 years ago by over 500 rangatira from around the country, provided the opportunity for everyone to call this place home. We know that this is a bad faith bill that seeks to divide us, to distract us, to dishonour Te Tiriti, rather than embracing a future where Te Tiriti underlies all that we do. The reason we are calling on people to do mass submissions is because we need to send a strong, clear message from as many people as possible that we don't support this bill. Now, we know that National and New Zealand First have already said they won't pass it at the second reading, but our job is to make sure they don't wriggle out of that promise. I mean, politicians are very known to break promises, so we need to hold them to account on that. But we also need to be able to send a message that the public supports Te Tiriti. The public wants to see Te Tiriti honoured. And so it's really key that the number of submissions falls on the side of opposition to this. And that's why around the motu, not just here, but you may be seeing everywhere, people are running these events to be able to drive up the numbers so that we get as many people as possible saying not just to kill this bill, but to honour Te Tiriti o Waitangi on this bill and every bill into the future as well. But first, let's talk about the bill, the elephant in the room. I'd like to hand over to our first speaker, Carwyn Jones, to take us away with some kōrero about the bill in Te Tiriti. Kia ora, Carwyn.
Tēnā tātou, ngā mihi kia koutou, ko Carwyn tōku ingoa, he uri ahau no Ngāti Kahununu ki te Wairoa. So my name's Carwyn, I'm from Ngāti Kahununu. And thanks for inviting me to be part of this submissions party. As Cassie's already said, it's really important that we demonstrate that there is overwhelming opposition to this bill, so that it's really clear that there's no political advantage in this bill progressing. And so just in the same way that we saw with the hikoi, that overwhelming opposition, that we ought to be showing that same opposition through the submissions process. Now, I've been having a few internet issues this evening, so
really?
apologise if I'm, but hopefully I'll stay with you and be able to stay with you this evening. So I didn't really have too much that I wanted to say at this point. I thought first of all, what I would just say is that in terms of getting your submission together, is that it's most effective if you use your words in the submission, draw on and ideas that you can draw on. But really, I think the most important thing is to kind of authentically reflect where you're coming from and why you might oppose this. So, your own words and Te Tiriti and about this and what concerns you might have with it, but most importantly, let them know that you oppose. In this case, all the technical detail is probably...
Sorry, Carwyn. As your sound is cutting out a little bit, could you please turn your video off and see whether or not that makes a difference? And maybe those of us who aren't speaking just yet will turn our videos off except for the sign language interpreter, and we'll see if that makes a difference. Thank you.
Aroha mai. I hope this works a little bit better. Um, as I was saying, I think in this case, the getting all the information about the technical detail of the bill and why you might oppose it um, is probably less important than showing that genuine and authentic opposition to the bill. There'll be plenty of people who are delving into the kind of constitutional and technical detail. And sure, feel free to do that if those are things that are really concerning you. But as I say, I think the most important thing is that this is authentic, that you're using your own words. For me, just the major concerns that I have about the bill is really that the bill is presenting a false picture of what Tiriti says. Now, we know already that whole concept of principles of the treaty is a kind of watered down, compromised version of what Te Tiriti talks about, and certainly doesn't fully reflect tino rangatiratanga. But what this bill is doing is rolling back this key mechanism that government has used to address issues relating to Te Tiriti. And it is presenting these principles that this is what Te Tiriti says. And I think that is really concerning. Now, of course, the bill can't change and isn't going to change the actual text of Te Tiriti and the words that were written in 1840 and agreed to in 1840. But what it is going to change, or what it seeks to change, is the legal meaning and effect of that agreement and how it is applied today. And it would represent a fundamental change to even how the treaty principles are applied today, let alone, as I say, being quite divergent from the agreement in Te Tiriti itself. What we see in the principles that are proposed, if I was to kind of give a general picture to characterize what is happening with those principles, is that they are seeking to subordinate tino rangatiratanga to kāwanatanga. So they are seeking to subordinate Maori authority to the authority of the Crown, and in fact, in many ways, seeking to raise tino rangatiratanga completely from that agreement. And also, particularly concerning, I think, is the way in which the proposed principles are seeking to remove recognition of Maori as Indigenous peoples. We have principles which suggest that Maori rights will only be recognised if the government agrees to them and if they are the same rights as everybody else. And that, I think, is erasing the distinctive identity and recognition of the rights of Indigenous people that Maori hold. And from my perspective, at least, I think that is not only, of course, contrary to the agreement in Te Tiriti, but also I think goes against the recognition of the rights of Indigenous people we've seen by the international community through the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So I probably don't want to go into any more detail than that just at the moment. I know Tina and Max will talk further, and I'm happy to uh, answer any questions if there's an opportunity to do that. But I thought that might just be a way of setting up the sort of framing and thinking about what are some of the big overriding concerns or issues with the principles that are being proposed in this bill. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora kawan, kei te mihi ki a koe, and thank you so much for consistently putting out so much good, solid information about what this bill means. I'm going to tukua te rākau over to Tina. There are a couple of questions coming on up for specific people, but what I might do is have our first kōrero amongst all three, and then I might, whiunga pātai and send the questions your way once we've had our initial kōrero. So, kia ora, Tina.
Kia ora, Cass. Tēnā koutou. And thank you very much, Carwyn, for that very lucid and clear outline of where we're at the moment and what are a number of the concerns. I guess if I just wanted to quickly delve into the treaty justice journey. And I think it's really helpful for us to look at where we've come with the principles of Te Tiriti. As Carwyn mentioned, there is this narrative that, well, they're not messing with Te Tiriti or Waitangi because they're not messing with the text, it's just the principles. But it's really important to remember that the principles are really the dominant and nearly the only way in which the government gives effect to Te Tiriti. So when you mess with the principles, it has the same legal and legislative effect as messing with the text of Te Tiriti. And of course, Maori for a long time have been saying that we would actually prefer you just honour the text of Te Tiriti. It's very clear, and there's no reason why you shouldn't honour the text of Te Tiriti. But the fact of one of the sticky issues and one of the reasons why the principles have the weight that they do is that is what was developed or promised within the 1975 Treaty of Waitangi Act when the tribunal was set up. So the Treaty of Waitangi Act was passed in 1975. And just remembering, like all of the amazing hikoi that we just saw across the nation, very similar activity happening across our nation for multiple causes in the lead up to 1975. And that's really what culminated in the Treaty of Waitangi Act. But if you have a look at that act, at the formation of that act, it tasks the tribunal to look at the principles, and that is based on this idea that there were two versions, an English version and a Maori version, and they were both valid but conflicting. And so the principles were proposed as a way to find a middle ground, a common ground between those two documents. But even back then, Maori knew that the English text did not meet the standard definition of a treaty, that being a document, a treaty, an agreement between two or more political authorities that is signed by two or more political authorities. And that definition is only comfortably met by Te Tiriti. But this is a reflection really of where the Crown has been on its journey. The Crown in 1975, when they formed the tribunal, were only at the stage in their journey where they were able to acknowledge that there were two documents that were conflicting, and they needed to find a common ground of sort. And so that's what the principles were developed to do. But we now know through that journey that, as that factually only one of those documents is a valid treaty, Te Tiriti. Now, that's not to say that the principles have been objectively bad. For better or worse, they have, arguably delayed treaty justice by honouring the text. At the same time, though, we have used them very well to protect Maori interests and also to protect Aotearoa for all New Zealanders as well. It's been used very effectively. The principles have been used very effectively as a roadblock to corporate extraction from Aotearoa. And if we look at this as a journey, the Treaty of Waitangi Act in 1975, and then the ability to hear historical violations of Te Tiriti from 1985. In 1987, we see the principles becoming more clearly defined. And again, that is where Te Tiriti was used to halt the sale of, public assets, and to halt the privatization of our public assets, including land and natural resources as well. So that's where we start to see the principles being used in that way. And then a really important finding by the Waitangi Tribunal in 2014 under the Paparahi o Te Raki claim. And I want to say, and I'll skip back a little bit because I really do want us to reflect on this claim. Actually, let me take us back here. Paparahi o Te Raki claim. Very robust process. And in fact, if you were going to develop a process for Aotearoa to clearly understand, the context and the meaning of Te Tiriti when it was signed in accordance with international contractual law, then what better process could you come up with this? And in fact, let's remember, because some of the disinformation at the moment suggests that the Waitangi Tribunal is a biased tribunal, that it's something that's out there to favour Māori. It's Crown appointed. It's constrained by Crown policy. It's subject to Crown legislation. It is Crown resourced. And within that resource, this particular claim that looked at the context for Te Tiriti and what it meant took over 10 years, was overseen by Māori and non-Māori expertise, looked at over 500,000 pages of evidence and listened to hundreds of expert witnesses from all backgrounds, over 31 weeks of hearings, and millions of dollars of research that's gone into that. And what did that tribunal find? Well, I've got a few quotes here for us to reflect upon. Let's have a look at just a couple of them. Suffice to say that to the extent we can generalize, we believe that the rangatira regarded the treaty as enhancing their authority, not detracting from it. Feel free to take screen grabs, whānau, because these are great quotes from this very robust process. They conclusively found that sovereignty was not ceded, but also they found that there was a level of deception, that what was played up on and what our tipuna believed that they were signing on to was something more akin to an alliance where they would get some protection, particularly from some of the more harmful ones who were arriving at that time. They've said very clearly that they found that the rangatira viewed that agreement with Hobson as a kind of a strategic alliance. The essential conclusion is that rangatira did not cede their sovereignty. They've also found here, and importantly, looking at this top left-hand quote here, the Waitangi Tribunal themselves found that once they considered the English text with an open mind, that they were under no obligation to find some sort of middle ground between the two versions. And so, and then just finally here, also that while this conclusion may seem radical, and certainly some of our politicians at the moment are suggesting that that's radical, it is not radical at all. In fact, it's upheld through international law. There's a number of New Zealand's leading scholars over the years who've studied the treaty, both Maori and Pākehā scholars, who have expressed these views for more than a generation right now. The conclusion that Maori never ceded sovereignty in February 1840 is not new, and certainly was not new to those who put that claim forward. But of course, whānau, if we are looking at this within this journey that we're on, I think we can confidently say that each step we've taken along this journey has stoked colonial anxiety. It's made them increasingly more anxious around what that means for their grasp of power. And certainly when Paparahi o Te Raki came out with its findings after that process, you could say that the more far-right conservative elements of Aotearoa were very concerned about what that meant, because it casts questions actually on what the limitations of kawanatanga could and should be if it was operating in accordance with Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So I'm going to slow when I get excited, I start to talk fast. And so off the back of that, there was then another report, Matike Mai Aotearoa, which said, okay, well, this, it had actually been underway for a while, but said, well, what do we do about that? What might it look like? There's definitely a space there for the Crown, but what does that space look like? And what is the space of rangatiratanga, and how might they work together? Again, this is something that was very concerning for the conservative right end of Aotearoa's political spectrum as well. And so the Treaty Principles Bill kind of takes that journey towards tiriti justice and completely derails it and regresses us back to before, I would argue, before 1975. And so that's a really important thing for us to understand, that we've been on this journey and each of those steps has gotten us towards tiriti justice. And also that this is not something to be afraid of. If you read Matike Mai, it's actually a beautiful document that speaks powerfully to how kawanatanga and tino rangatiratanga might operate in relationship to each other in Aotearoa. Huge impacts across, I'd call it a whole of ecosystem impact for the impacts it will have across our world. Impacts upon other marginalized groups, because this is essentially the Crown saying that unique protections for one group are unfair, but we know Māori are not the only marginalized group that needs unique protections in Aotearoa. So it raises important questions around, well, what will your approach be for the unique protections for our whānau aniwiniwa, our whānau hauwā, our whānau whaikaha, all of these other groups that need specific protections precisely because the Crown government has not protected them well in the past, whānau. That's exactly why they need those protections as well. Our rights and our protections are, as Māori, are rooted in our connection to this land, but also stem out of a history of rights abuses by this country. I'm going to just flick through here and talk about the rationale for the bill that David Seymour has put forward. So the first rationale being that there's confusion around te tiriti. Well, I would say, there's plenty of treaty workshops that you can attend. Like, you can't throw a stone without hitting a treaty workshop educator these days. And David's more than welcome to go to one of Veronica Tawhai's treaty workshops. Probably won't. I don't. Anyway, he can come to mine, I guess, but he won't have fun. Go to Veronica's, Dave. Go to Veronica's. She'll give you a great outline for what te tiriti means. But also, let's not forget, we have 40 to 50 years of jurisprudence talking about it. There is no confusion about it. It's just that we've been on a journey getting closer to tiriti justice. They've said that they need clarity around its constitutional status. Like I explained, that conversation is already happening through Matike Mai. They've said that we need a national conversation on what te tiriti means. Conversation should be held and convened on a basis of good faith and truth, and there's some straight up mistruth surrounding this bill. And they've also said that it's important for unity and peace in Aotearoa. Well, it's done anything but that, and in fact, Māori are being subjected to quite a bit of hate because of this process. But what I would say is that also there's been some incredible love shown across Aotearoa, epitomized in the hikoi. And if there is one unified voice, it was the unified voice of tens of thousands that we heard 2 weeks ago who were in opposition to this bill. And just briefly, I think I call them Dave's principles. They're quite paru. The first one is that the Crown has full power to govern, and they do so in the best interests of everyone. Well, I think, you only have to read a few tribunal reports to see that there is no historical basis for putting faith in this government to govern in the best interests of everyone. But also, they already have that full power at the moment. But there is that report from 2014 which says we need a different conversation around what the limitations to that power is. And I'd say it's their anxiety and worry about that conversation is really what's behind a lot of this bill, and their desire to remove the most effective roadblock to exploitation that we have. And then the second of Dave's principles is that it recognises the right that iwi and hapu had at the time of signing. However, if those are not agreed to, if they'll only respect those if they're in a settlement, especially if they differ to the rights that everybody else has. So let's be very clear. Internationally, again, under international law, Indigenous rights do not come from treaties and do not come from settlements. Indigenous rights come from our relationship to this land and the waters surrounding it. And there are many Māori who have also been culturally dispossessed through colonization who wouldn't even know if their iwi has settled. And so it's egregious in the extreme that they would do that, but it's also not in accordance with international law or the nature of Indigenous rights as human rights. And then finally, their third principle is that everyone is equal before the law and entitled to equal protection and equal benefit. But the irony is, of course, they're not treating Te Tiriti o Waitangi equally. And in fact, it can be described as a form of treaty racism, because out of the 1,900 treaties that New Zealand is party to, this is the only one that they deem that they have the audacity to try and redefine all by themselves. They would never go to Japan and say, we're going to redefine the treaty we have with you all by ourselves, or France or USA. They only do that with this treaty. And so, just the irony that they're saying that this is, about equal protection and equal benefit, but they're not actually demonstrating equality in the way that they're approaching Te Tiriti. And so if this winds up in a referendum, let's be clear, they will be holding a referendum around human rights, because Te Tiriti o Waitangi is a recognised human rights document. And our Indigenous rights and Tiriti rights are human rights. And again, just to go back to the fundamentals of definition, human rights should never be subject to a referendum. That's why they are rights. They shouldn't be up for other people voting on them. And so I guess that's just my speed date version on what it is that we're looking at. Sorry if I've gone over time. I'll leave it there. Mauri ora whānau, thank you for your time.
He mihi tino nui ki a koe i te tuahine. What an incredible run through of what we need to know about the bill. So thank you so much. And we might have a couple of questions afterwards as well. But for now, I'm going to pass over the rako to Max. No, my Max, tell us a little bit more.
Kia ora, Cassie. Kia ora koutou. Ko Max Harris tōku ingoa, he Pākehā ahau, he tangata tiriti ahau. Yeah, my name is Max, and I'm Pākehā, which means that my basis for being in this country is and always will be Te Tiriti or Waitangi. I'll just speak about three things. First of all, just talk through some building blocks, but Cowan and Tina have covered off so much amazingly. Secondly, just go briefly through some tips on submissions. And then thirdly, I was going to try to answer some of the questions that are left over in the chat, and I won't speak for longer than 15 minutes. But with the kind of building blocks, I just wanted to start by telling a story. It's been really heartening to see so many community events and so many submission parties. I never thought we'd have like select committee submission parties, but it's going off on social media. And I just wanted to remember one event in South Auckland a few weeks ago, because there was, I think, a really inspiring moment that came out of that for all of us to hang on to. So there was someone on the panel who was kind of asking curious, constructive questions, and he said that he wasn't an expert on Te Tiriti or Waitangi. Sorry, I'll slow down. I also speak fast when I'm excited. And he said, you know what? The Crown hasn't respected or honoured Te Tiriti or Waitangi for 180 years, 184 years. So why is this even worth our time? And shouldn't we give up on this? And it was a really challenging and fair question. But what was incredible was that that sparked this discussion from everyone who was in the audience, most of whom were Māori and Pacifica and working class, and people started putting up their hand. And one by one, people raised examples of things that had been fought for and won, going back to the 19th century, going back to the Māori Land March, going back to Kura Kaupapa and Kohanga Reo, and people really strongly communicated the idea that things have been fought for, things have been won, we've come so far, and it's exactly what David Seymour wants for us all to give up on this journey towards Te Tiriti justice that Tina was talking about. They want us to believe that this isn't worth it, but I think by standing up, by holding all of these community events, we are challenging that view. And I just want to say thanks heaps to Cowan and Tina, and if you're interested in more of their work, Cowan has a really amazing primer on the Treaty Principles Bill, which is just like a short couple of pages guide, and I really recommend looking at that. And Tina has some amazing videos online, including on Koe Koea, if you're on Instagram, also her amazing book, Kia Mau. Tina's and Cowan have gone over the kind of key building blocks. So we know Te Tiriti or Waitangi, the Māori text of Te Tiriti, which is fundamental, legal, and historically, has those three articles: kāwanatanga for the Crown, powers of the governor for the Crown, tino rangatiratanga for Māori, ultimate, paramount, chiefly authority for Māori, and then the extension of the rights and privileges of British subjects to Māori. Those are the three articles of Te Tiriti. Then we know we have the treaty principles, which Cowan's talked about, a watered down version of Te Tiriti, principles like partnership, active protection, also recently tino rangatiratanga being acknowledged as a principle, as well as kāwanatanga. And one way of thinking about all of this is just to think about the treaty principles as a thread that ties together Te Tiriti and existing New Zealand law and policy. So there's this thin thread because the treaty principles are a watered down version of Te Tiriti. And what the government is trying to do through the Treaty Principles Bill is to cut that thread, is to cut that remaining connection between what is in Te Tiriti and what is in our law and in our policy. And Tina's just given some really forceful arguments for what's wrong with the Treaty Principles Bill, and Cowan mentioned several too. Three for me are, first of all, that it's an attack on tino rangatiratanga, as Tina showed. The Treaty Principles Bill mirrors the structure of the treaty in having three parts, but it absolutely mutilates the content of Te Tiriti. And in every form of this bill, in particular, it's been an attempt to erase tino rangatiratanga, as Cowan pointed out. Initially, it reframed that as chieftainship for all New Zealanders. Now it's really whittled that down, as Tina said, to this protection of rights at the time that the treaty was signed and limited to treaty settlements. So I think that's what's wrong with it. It's an attack on Māori rights. And tino rangatiratanga is obviously important for Māori and has been positive for everyone. It has led to incredibly strong environmental outcomes. And that shared authority in Te Tiriti is also the basis for exciting, imaginative, new constitutional visions, such as the Matike Mai vision that Tina mentioned. So that's the problem one. Second problem, as Tina pointed out, it's removing a roadblock to corporate exploitation and extraction. Just to add to what Tina said, in the 1980s, the treaty principles were used to slow down privatization. And then again in the 2000s, the treaty principles were used to impede the mixed ownership model, the attempt to sell off energy companies. So this very much is an attempt to take away that roadblock to make privatization easier, and that's a second problem with it. And the third problem is that this enables further abuses of power. So if something as fundamental as Te Tiriti can be ripped up in this way, what else could be ripped up? So those are just three problems of many: that it attacks tino rangatiratanga, that it removes a roadblock to privatization, and that it allows abuse of power. And I think it's especially important that Tauiwi non-Māori and Pākehā in particular speak up about this bill. We have benefited from colonization and years of white supremacy. And also it's so important that we never allow this bill or anything like it to come up again, and that we use the authority that we have in our communities to speak up about it. I'll come back to that at the end. So those are the building blocks, just about what Te Tiriti is, what the treaty principles are, the kind of thread between Te Tiriti and the treaty principles, and what's wrong with the bill. Now, just some tips on submissions. So I actually asked two people kind of on the inside who've had quite a lot of experience hearing submissions for what their advice was on how to do a good submission. And I've got just a few to share. Well, maybe around 7 tips here. But the main first point is just that there's no magic in doing a submission. So the word submission kind of sounds a bit technical and legal, but actually this is just about writing your message to the government. And you can write your message however it works for you. And that could be your personal story. That could just be one idea or one thought. And there's really no magic to this. So do it however you feel comfortable, write out your message. A second tip is just be really clear that you oppose the bill. So this is a tip from one of the insiders. So they do count up what people's positions were on the bill. And to make that crystal clear for the people in Select Committee, you could start by saying, I oppose this bill. So I just really recommend doing that if you have time. Third, personal stories are really impactful. This relates to the fourth point, which is that the select committees actually have people doing their own research, and they'll dig into the law and the history. I think where we can all make a real difference is by drawing on our personal stories and our experiences. And I know there was a question about an example of a personal story, and I'll come on to that. So that's tip 3 and 4. Use personal stories, and don't worry, there's already other people doing research. Tip 1 is there's no magic in it. Tip 2 is be clear you oppose the bill. The fifth point is, and I think this is quite a useful suggestion, is if you want and you feel comfortable, you could say that you've looked at the bill and you've talked to people about it. And the reason that might be important here is that David Seymour is using this bad faith argument that people opposing the bill haven't read it. And of course, he's not really arguing in good faith. He has an agenda. But if we are going to at least address that point, we can address it strongly by just mentioning that we have looked at the bill or we're familiar with the bill. And I think that can add power to our arguments. 6th and 7th points are about your oral submission. So there's a written submission, and then you can tick that you want to do an oral submission, which just means that on Zoom or in person, you are presenting to the MPs. And the 6th point is you might want to remind them of the key point or the key points in your message, in your submission. And the 7th point, which these two insiders confirmed to me, is that MPs often say they've read the submissions, but actually they often haven't read the submissions. And so that means it's helpful to go over them again, and also in particular to come back to your personal stories. So those are just some tips, but really you don't have to be an expert. Yeah, there's no magic to it. And I'm sure everyone here could write an amazing submission. I'm now going to just pivot for 3 or 4 minutes to the questions that people have asked. I'm just going to try to answer some of the questions that haven't already been answered in the Google Doc. And so the first question I saw was about whether you could provide an example of how we could use personal experience to support our submissions. And so I'll give an example from my perspective as a Pākehā person. So I've been really lucky to have some engagement with Te Ao Māori, the Māori world, and with Te Tiriti or Waitangi, starting from a primary school which really centered Māori history and te reo Māori and had a Māori principle. You could mention something like that, an experience in school or in your community. You could also say more broadly that Te Ao Māori, the Māori world, has enriched your life, whether that's through making you think in a different way, through language, whether that means appreciating certain values, including hospitality and humility and whakapapa. And you could say that Te Tiriti is the window into being able to live in a country with Te Ao Māori and to be able to learn about Te Ao Māori. So that's a second example of how you might use your personal story. So it could just be about an experience in your life. It doesn't have to be about a really specific memory. Could be something that you think is valuable for Te Tiriti or where Te Tiriti has been useful in your life. A second question was about the pros and cons of recommending in our submissions that we should constitutionally protect the rights of Māori. This is quite a detailed question, so I won't spend heaps of time on it. But just to say, one pro is I understand that people want to take Te Tiriti off the table, off from being a political football. And in that sense, it might be a useful point to make that these fundamental parts of our constitution should be taken off being used as a parliamentary football. One con is that, as many Māori activists and scholars have said over the years, there is a risk that if Te Tiriti is put into a single written constitution in the kāwanatanga sphere, that means that it's vulnerable to being rewritten by the kāwanatanga sphere, and that might be a reason we don't want to put Te Tiriti into a written constitution. There are pros and cons and different views amongst many people about that, but that's just one pro and one con. I'm just going to scroll down and try to answer some other questions. There's a question about a British law recognizing native title already in place before 1840. It is true that there's a long history of a concept of native or customary title, which is a legal concept from other countries and from going back further in history. What specific protections does Te Tiriti confer upon marginalized peoples other than Māori? So it has, there's 3 articles about kāwanatanga, tino rangatiratanga, and extending rights to Māori. I think the best answer to this is that Te Tiriti provides the basis for people who are non-Māori to make a home in this place. Those are the words paraphrasing of Moana Jackson. And also that Te Tiriti provides an inclusive vision that is a platform to fight against the oppression of other marginalized peoples. That's the quickest answer I could give to that. What if you have little direct experience yet support tangata whenua rights under Te Tiriti? Well, I think that's fine. And I think you could just say you support tangata whenua rights under Te Tiriti because, as Kawana and Tina said, that's what Te Tiriti says. And yeah, I don't think you should worry about if you don't have that experience. The fact that you're on this call is a commitment. And I think it's just good to speak up and get that message across. There's a question about Pacific peoples. I will leave that to others for now, but happy to come back to that if that doesn't get answered, just being aware of the limits of my expertise. Should we send a submission to our local MP too? And if hosting a submission party, what could be a call to action? These are the last 2 I'll deal with. So I think, yep, good idea if you can to send your submission to your local MP. You can find out who your local MP is by Googling. You just need to email them that. That's useful for your local MP to provide further advocacy. And with a submission party, I would just think about, where is your community? Is it that you know your neighbors? Is it that you have a community of friends that you could invite round? Is it your church, or is it a youth group? Is it a political party or a political organizing group? Think about where you are and think about asking people to come in. You could say you just want to catch up, but also keen to have a chat about Te Tiriti. That would be one way. And then while people are there, suggest taking a bit of time to do submissions. Or you could say you're really keen to have a proper discussion about this and you want to share what you've heard from elsewhere. And Together for Te Tiriti has some amazing resources. And I really want to pay tribute to Cassie and Rangi Maria, who've led Action Station's amazing strategy on this. I'll wrap up. I'm just coming up to 15 minutes just to go and think back to that story that I started with. Just think about all of the people that have struggled up until this point. And Māori who, as Tina said, had pre-existing rights prior to Te Tiriti, but have fought for recognition of Te Tiriti. And wouldn't it be amazing if in a few years' time, when you're asked, what did you do when there was that derailing attempt at the Treaty Principles Bill, that you said, actually, I could have done other things on that Wednesday night, but I decided to come to that Zoom. And out of that Zoom, I did a submission party and I got all of my friends in my community to submit. And we stopped the Treaty Principles Bill and we helped to progress honouring Te Tiriti. I think that would make us all proud. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora, Max, and we now know what Max's friends, community, and families are going to be ending up doing at any Christmas events over the next month. I'm just cracking up over here because this is the busiest chat that I've ever seen in my life, and believe you me, I've been in a few Zoom webinars, if you will probably know by now, and it's just popping off. And I really want to mihi to everyone for your incredible questions, for people helping each other out and sharing your tips that you've already worked out, and also for the little reconnection between Marnie Prickett and her history teacher. That was a great moment hidden somewhere in the chat as well. So there's a bit of something for everyone in there. Hey, we do have a few minutes left, and I just want to hand back to the speakers, and Carwyn, you first, just because I think that your sound was a bit cut out near the end, and want to provide you that opportunity first. But is there anything that you really just want to drive home that has come back through the chat or that you've just thought of? And we'll throw to you, Carwyn, first if you'd like, but Katie Pai if not.
Kia ora, yeah, and aroha mai for my internet quality. But I think I don't really have much to add to the kōrero that's been happening, just to also pick up on the points that, as well as the substance of these Dave's principles that are being proposed, I think there are also these questions around process too that people might want to address in terms of thinking about, the ways in which the ways in which treaty partners should engage with each other, the kinds of ways in which you would expect a government to talk to Māori about some of these issues, as well as just thinking about some of the issues that both Tina and Max have raised in terms of what this means in terms of a government's approach to fundamental constitutional questions, to fundamental issues of human rights, and how that actually might be or should be quite concerning for not just Māori rights and not just rights under Te Tiriti, but thinking about broader issues too. Maybe just the one final thing that I might add in terms of thinking about, I've seen Tina's given some great responses in the chat to thinking about the ways in which Te Tiriti might be a benefit or support to non-Māori, to tangata tiriti, and I know Max talked about some of this as well. One thing that I think might be helpful to think about in that context too is the way in which actually those that treaty relationship has or can provide for ways of working that includes participation of different voices in decision making, that provides for the ability to accommodate difference and diversity in our public life. And of course, Te Tiriti is focused particularly on how that happens with Māori, but it also provides models for how that can accommodate difference and diversity for other communities as well. That's probably all enough from me. Kia ora koutou.
Good Cowan. Tina, do you have any other whakaaro, and appreciating your awesome comments in the chat as well?
Te te pai. Yeah, I guess what I would implore for everybody is, and probably I'm preaching to the choir because we're all here, but maybe this is something you can share with your friends who might be wavering about whether or not they're going to put in a submission or throw their support behind the opposition to this bill. And I would just say that just think of yourself as an ancestor. You know, like I have looked back sometimes at my ancestors. I've done research into my ancestors, and some of them were on the right side of history for some issues, and some of them weren't. And there's some that I'm hugely proud of for the stands that they took at their time. So think about what your descendants are going to think of you when they look back and they go, oh my gosh, look at what my ancestor wrote. Look at what my ancestor said at this pivotal time. So that's how we whakapapa forward, right? We think about what our mokopuna are going to think about us. And then the other thing, though, is to think back to that time in 1840 where these ancestors took their mana, the most sacred markings from their most sacred part of their body up here that you can see, and put that on this document to make that document sacred. To use their special mana to say, yes, we will allow you to call this place home. And what an incredible opportunity this is to thank them, to acknowledge what they did in that act for all Aotearoa as well. And finally, you know, Moana used to say it's important, yes, it's important to speak truth to power, but it's also even more important to speak power into your truth. So whānau, this is your opportunity to speak power into your truth for Te Tiriti through your submission and through a spoken oral submission to the select committee as well. Whatever they do is what they're going to do, but this is your opportunity to speak to your descendants through this act as well, for them to be proud of you. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora e te tuahine, ngā mihi, and for bringing Moana back in the room with us too, and our mokopuna and our ancestors. Whakapapa forward, I love that. Max, do you have any final whakaaro that you would like to share?
Yeah, kia ora, Cassie. Just three real quick things that just came up from the other amazing answers. One, I think it's helpful to bring the conversation back to values, especially when it's with your friends and in the submissions. Values like sticking to our promises or belonging, and values we can all appeal to. Point number two is, Carwin just reminded me of a further point, which is, this whole bill is also about removing one of the Te Tiriti partners. That's what it's doing, because it is trying to write Māori out of Te Tiriti as it rewrites that, and doing that all without any kind of engagement with Māori. So that's a further kind of problem with the bill. And then the last point is a practical one, which is just, I know we've heard lots about a 6-month period, but the deadline is actually the 7th of January. So there's a 6-month period for the whole select committee process, but the deadline's quite soon. And once Christmas is out of the way, and we've all tried to relax a little bit, that'll be coming up real soon. So if you think you're going to be busy, do the submission now, and get ready for an oral submission down the line. Ngā mihi, Casey.
Got a mix. Now, we do have a few more bits and pieces before we finish up tonight, so it's not all over just yet, but a huge mihi to our kai kōrero I tēnei pō for sharing some speed dating goodness. Like, I mean, if you could bottle up all of that kōrero and just, share it with the world, it's just incredible. So thank you to our kai kōrero for sparking up our ideas, kind of course correcting on some of the misinformation and just making it really clear from their expertise what this is all about. What we're going to do next is, some of you may be aware that Action Station has built a tool for making submissions. It is not by any means the only tool around. It is one. We did build this from scratch for a number of months, taking into account some of that best practice, similar to what Max was talking about. So, as he mentioned, what really matters is as many unique individual submissions as possible. So, in the past, as Action Station, we may have been directing people to templates, but over the years, the select committees have become quite savvy and I think discerning of template style tools. And so we try to veer away from that and actually just prompt people to make their own submission and then have that as a chance to be able to download it as a PDF and then go and send it to the Parliament website. But by all means, it's not the only one. In a second, I'm going to get Rangi Māori to take us through that tool. So if you want to use it, you can. The other options are, you might see some floating around, but you can also just go straight to the parliamentary website, which I think someone might put in the chat very soon. And there is two options. One is you fill out your own form in the boxes. The other option is that you attach a PDF. We've been told in the past that having a PDF just gives it a bit more of a tone of seriousness, which is why our tool takes you to a downloadable PDF that you can then attach, but you can do either or. As mentioned, you can also be old school and send them in via mail as well. So I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Rangi Māori, and she's going to just take us through the tool so you can get to know it a little bit if you would like to use that. Kia ora Rangi Māori.
Kia ora tātou. Oh, what an amazing night. I'm absolutely reeling from all of that information. And just want to tautoko what Cassie mentioned earlier about what's happening in the chat at the moment. I too have never seen a busier chat, and it's lucky that there is a team of us because there are lots and lots of things going on. But I'm going to try and keep this quick. We're going to go through the Action Station submission tool. I'm going to share my screen, and if you are keen to fill out a submission as we're going and do that with us tonight, I would suggest going to togetherfortiriti.nz and you'll be able to follow me from there. Ka pai? Okay. So on our site here, our Together for Te Tiriti site, you'll see a few tabs at the top here. We're going to go to the submissions tabs because ko te rā te kaupapa o te pō, and we're going to go make a submission. If you were looking to host submissions parties at a later date, you can have a look for our party pack here, and you can also put your event on our events calendar. And if you have other people who are asking and going, oh gosh, I'm so gutted I missed out on that amazing, amazing Zoom that you were on last night, go to our events calendar because there are lots of other parties happening. So for tonight, we're going to go and have a look at make a submission, and you're going to land here and you're going to get some really helpful tips that are going to pop up. Max has covered a lot of these, but the main thing is just to speak your truth. You're the expert of your experience and your voice matters. So that's the thing we're going to keep at the front of our minds. It's not a flash legal document. We just need to be clear and get to the point and speak to the bill itself. So you'll see as we go through that we've got a few prompts to help you do that. Using facts and personal stories, real life examples is really helpful. But one of the key things is we don't want to be putting our personal information into our submission text itself because that can be made public. Ka pai? We've already heard no swearing, calling people racist or name calling or abuse directed at individuals. We want to stick to the point and make our submission about our submission. Ka pai? So once we've gone through our tips, there are three main steps that we're going to go through using our submission tool. The first thing is we're going to write our submissions. We've got some prompts that can help guide you. Then we're going to download that submission and you'll get a pop-up of a PDF document. And then the most important bit is we're going to actually submit it on the parliamentary website. So you'll see here you've got a little progress bar. Oh, it skipped a page. So the first thing you'll have here is you'll be putting your name, your email, and a bit of contact information if you want on there, and you'll be given the option to sign up to hear more from Action Station about the submissions process. So once you've gone through and done that, you'll be taken here to the Make a Submission page. If anyone has any issues, please feel free to put them in the chat, and myself and our team will catch up with them following this. Ka pai? So the first thing is we've got our section here, who are you and what connects you to this bill? If you feel confident and you know what you're ready to say, you've been listening to these amazing speakers, karawhiua, chuck your kōrero in here. We've also got some examples here so that you can see what might be helpful to formulate your ideas. And sometimes people get a bit intimidated by the task of writing a submission, the parliamentary aspect of it, rata rata. Feel free to have a look through the prompts and demystify some of those thoughts. So we're just looking here for what your background is, what your personal kind of connection to this issue is. And then if you'd like, we've got an example. So if you press use this example, it'll take you through and then you can fill in a little bit more here. My ancestor signed te tiriti, ka pai? And then the next section, you have to complete all 3 sections to get through, is specifically about why you oppose the bill. So again, you might have those answers ready. If you don't, we've got a few examples here. You could focus on the overall intent of the bill, or you could dive into the detail. And there's a few sentence starters that might help get you going. So you could chuck an example in there, and then you can go through and personalize this and talk about some of the things you've observed or experienced. And then we'll go next. And our last section is really important. It's about the recommendations that you have for the select committee. We've got a few recommendations drafted here that you could make your own. So we pop those into the box, and your recommendations here will go towards the select committee, and they will help inform their decisions. And then we've got a review and edit space. So you're going to go through and have a look through, make sure that it all sounds like you, sounds legit. If you're not happy with it, you can go down here and create a new submission. But if you're happy with it, you're going to download a PDF. And once your PDF is completed, you can read through these tips. So make sure that you've put your name when you get to the parliamentary website, put your name and details in there. If you want to make an oral submission, that's also really important and can be a really strong way to make a connection and make your case about the submissions process itself and how you feel about the bill. We also are really, really encouraging people to make videos and encourage others to send their submissions. So to upload your submission, you're going to select whether or not you're submitting as an individual or an organization. We are encouraging people to make oral submissions if they can. And then you're going to fill out your personal details and choose the file to upload. And this will be named, like mine would be named Rangi Māori's TPB submission. If you have any issues, flick us an email and we'll help you. Ka pai? So once you've done that, you click send your submission and it'll take you here to the parliamentary website. There's lots of really helpful information in here. So again, as an individual on behalf of an organization, do you want to make an oral submission or not? And then you can progress through. Once again, if anyone has any pātai about how to do their submissions, please feel free to email our team. The most important things are that you're going to write, you're going to download, and then you're going to upload your submission to the parliamentary website. And I think a lot of the questions have been covered in the doc, but if you have any more questions, please feel free to send them through to us. And I'll pass it over to our Huamahi Cassie to take us on from here.
Rawe, ngā mihi iho. So that's one tool that you can use to guide you through a set of prompts to share your whakaaro. As mentioned, we really encourage you to make it your own. So even if you use the little prompts and send them in, just try to zhuzh it up a little bit, because what we know is Our mates at Hobson's Pledge have their own little tool going on, but right now that's very templatey. And so, yeah, there's a chance that those might be all counted as one submission rather than as unique ones. And our job is to get as many unique ones as we possibly can, so that then when it comes to the report that gets made after the select committee process, they usually do a count of how many in support, how many opposed, and we want it to say record amount of support of opposition for this bill ever. That's what we're looking to hit, and then we know that the use of the public can't be used against us to be able to get these politicians to change their mind. Now, I'm going to change things up a little bit. Because I know that people are dropping off to be able to go, put their kids in bed or whatever it might be. I'm going to end the formal proceedings in a little bit with a bit of information, and then some of us will stay on from Action Station. And if you do want to stay on and work on your submission until 8:30 or ask us any more questions, you can. But if you'd actually prefer to head off and just focus in your own time, kei te pai tēnā hoki, that's okay too. So we'll start finishing up with a few bits and pieces of extra information. The first thing to say is that with the submissions, this is different to the petition. I think most people probably know that. So some of you may have seen the petition led by Maringi and Whiria, who are some awesome Ngāti Whakauē young people. And Maringi was in the room. I'm not sure if she still is, but if she is, kia ora Maringi. They led this petition, which is now up to 291,000 signatures opposing the Treaty Principles Bill. That's more people who live in Hamilton. That's more people who live in Dunedin. And it is also more people than voted for the ACT Party. And so just noting that also will go into a submission, we'll make sure that that's known. But to remind people, if they get a bit confused and they think they've already done a submission, they might have signed the petition. And just to clarify, have you actually gone and done the next step, which is a submission? So just a note on that. Once you've done your submission, we're really encouraging people to share it outwards with people in your community or on your social media. Maybe it's saying, I've just completed my submission. This is what I talked about. Really would be great if more people could submit too. Remember, we're not just asking Māori to submit, we're asking tangata tiriti and non-Māori to submit, because this is about all of us. It's completely about all of us, and we know that the minority of Māori is being used against us, right? Because we are a smaller number within the population, although hitting 20% is pretty exciting. So please share with others on your social media once you've submitted and tell people why you've done that. If you would like to run your own submissions party, I can't guarantee Tina, Carwin, and Max will come to all of them unless you ask them very nicely. But it doesn't have to be like that. We've actually set up this guide, and one of the team will post it in the chat. And it's a guide to running your own events and your own submissions parties. So even if it's just a group of mates, ambushing your fams into the submission party over the ambrosia and the barbecue, or whether or not you actually go out into your community or your community group and run one. There's an events guide there that is a party pack, and it will let you know about how you can do that. And it has some ready-made videos in there, so you don't have to I guess bring in different speakers. You can just show those videos. So I think those are the main things. What every party does have, I think, is a good party photo. So for those of you who are willing to be in the party photo, please take the moment now to turn your cameras on. If you don't want to be in the party photo, turn your cameras off or keep them off. And we're just going to take a moment to and I think Hannah will give us the word when she's ready. Kei te pai, Hannah, where are you? Oh my gosh, there's so many faces. Yep, she's ready and willing. And I'm going to ask you to do the awkward party thing where you strike a pose and make sure you smile and also hold that pose. I'm gonna count to 10 and please hold, or change it up. You could do a few different poses, expand your repertoire. And the point is that Hannah will have to move through all the different screens to capture all the people during that time. Kei te pai tēnā? So, get ready, get your poses ready, and I'm going to count to 10 and we'll take those photos. Right, let's go. Tahi, rua, toru, whā, rima, ono, fitu, waru.
Sorry, Cassie, I'm gonna need you to count like maybe 5 times slower.
Okay, keep holding people or change it up. Ano, tahi, rua, toru. My partner's laughing in the background. I don't know if he's laughing at me or a meme, but we'll just assume it's me. Toru, whā, rima, ono, fitu, waru, ewa. To ko, Hannah, did we make it?
Yeah, all done.
All done? Yay! Kia ora, Hannah. So, just huge mihi to all of you for being here tonight. I just looking at the smiles of all of you right now, it's like, how often do we all smile and feel joyful about making submissions? It just is kind of unprecedented. And I think it's because we all know why we're doing it. We all know what this is about. We all know that Te Tiriti is our future, that we know that it makes a better future, and that we've seen kotahitanga in action even just over the past year, and we know what a better Aotearoa can look like. It's already all there in the blueprint that is Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So I want to mihi to every single one of you for taking the time to do what's right, to do what is right for us, for Māori, and for our country, and just karawhia iho mā, just karawhia. Appreciate all of you, appreciating our speakers, appreciating our sign language interpreters and our team for putting this on behind the scenes. And I will do a closing karakia to finish us up. And again, we'll be online for the next 10 minutes if you do want to ask any other pātai. Otherwise, you've got everything you need to do. Just go and smash it. So, kia ora. Me karakia tātou. Unuhia, unuhia. Unuhia ki te uru tapunui. Kia wātia, kia māma, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua, te arataka tū. Hoiara, e rongo whakeere ake ki runga tuturu whakamaua kia tina, tina. Haumi e hui e, tai ki e.